And I have the great pleasure of introducing to you President Kimberly Hollingsworth. She is the
Mouthful.
president. I know, I'm just too excited. She is the president of Harvey College in the city colleges of Chicago. And what you can read her bio on LinkedIn and learn about all the great things she's done in the places she's been. She's been in the city colleges of Chicago system for over 20 years. But what I think is most important for you to know is that she has demonstrated a commitment at all levels to understand the student experience. She has worked with transfer students. She has worked as a dean of continuing education. She's worked in student affairs. She's worked in academic affairs. So she has like really a holistic understanding and practical experience on what makes things work for students. And so I think that's what makes her a transformational and innovative leader. When she talks to you about the things talks to you today about the things that she had to do in order to help her students regain some ground with COVID, and not even beyond COVID. Like, she was losing students before COVID. And so COVID just made it a little bit worse. And so what she did was seize the moment and figure out, how do we turn this around? What do we have to do that's innovative? How do I take some risk? And I think when you hear what she's talking about and what she did, you will be intrigued and motivated to disrupt the system, because that's what we're talking about this whole week, right? We're talking about how do we disrupt systems that have perpetuated inequity, and that it requires that we reimagine things. And so President Hollingsworth has reimagined the system and has implemented some things that are really shaking it up and making the situation better for her students and providing them opportunities that many of them would not have had before. So without any further delay, I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Hollingsworth.
Thank you so much, Nia. I mean, I listened to, snapshots of my bio, and you never think that you're making that much of a difference until you sit back and hear what others have to say about you. So I really do appreciate such an eloquent introduction. Much of the great work that is being done at Olive Harvey College is attributed to my amazing team, some of whom I believe may have had an opportunity to join us today. But I am super excited to share highlights of the equity-centered work that we've been doing here at Olive Harvey College, and also to share with you some impactful initiatives from our equity plan that we actually began drafting in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And as Nia mentioned, I've been with City Colleges for over 20 years and higher ed over 25 years. And we have never had such intentional conversations around equity, like we've been having lately. And, it's actually really refreshing to have a chancellor who is really committed to anti-racism and improving outcomes for marginalized populations. So super excited to share some of the lessons that we learned and some of the initiatives that we started right before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and some things that we'll be doing to disrupt the system even more as we go through the pandemic. So again, as we were starting our equity planning, the pandemic hit, and we had to pivot, because if we didn't learn anything else, the pandemic unveiled to us just how inequitable many of our existing systems and services really were. And so we started to ask ourselves some questions like, why equity? And then why now? Well, quite frankly, we're a community college, so it's part of our mission. That is the Olive Harvey College mission. And so we knew that this was work that was absolutely essential and necessary to move the needle. And our goal is to really move beyond the ingress. Access to education, in our opinion, is a fundamental right of everyone. And it really contributes to the greater good. And equity serves as a counterbalance to access, ensuring both opportunity and fairness. Now, fairness to some may look a little differently. And that may mean that some marginalized groups may get more than others who inherently have had more. And people have to be okay with that. We had to get our faculty to a point where they understood that, hey, this student may need more resources, may need more time, may need more attention. But that's the only way we're going to find an equity balance. And why now? Well, the time is now. I wish this would have happened a long time ago. We are really far from, where we need to be. But there's no better time than the right now. And so being able to curate equitable and inclusive spaces is really important to supporting students as they navigate the 21st century landscape. And so I thought it was really important to set the context and describe our college community to you, because we see ourselves as very unique. There are 7 city colleges within the city colleges system, and Olive Harvey right now is the smallest of the 7 city colleges. And some of this context is laid out with respect to fall 2019, because that's when we started our planning. And so we serve about 4,900 students, and that includes credit bearing, continuing education, GED, and ESL students. We are a federally designated, predominantly Black institution, with 69% of our students being African American. But we are an emerging HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution, where 25% of our students identify as Hispanic. Over 93% of our students placed into some form of developmental education, be it math or English. And most of our students are not traditional age students. The average age is 26. And something we're not completely proud of, but we're working on. You'll see some of those initiatives around retention. As of fall of 2019, our fall to spring retention was 65%. A little more about our community. Our IPES completion rate is 24%. And those of you who work in community college know that that is not as bad as it may seem. There was a time when city colleges and Olive Harvey College had single-digit completion rates. And IPES is a national benchmark. We know that our students come to us for many reasons, but what we are judged based on is the IPES completion rate. 82% of our students are first generation, meaning neither their parents didn't go to college. 66% are Pell eligible. More than 90% receive some form of financial aid. And I can't remember if I mentioned, but we are located on the southeast side of Chicago, the Roseland-Pullman neighborhood, where 23% of our population is at or below the poverty line. And it is also an area that unfortunately has been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, which leads us to the beginning of our equity story. So before we began drafting our plan, our actual equity plan, that is a front-facing, public-facing document that anyone can review, equity had always been at the top of our minds. And so what I wanted to do was share you an example prior to us embarking upon a formal equity planning process. In the spring of 2019, recreational cannabis became legal in the state of Illinois. And my faculty approached me because they wanted to ensure that our population of Black and Brown students, those most disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, had an opportunity to capitalize on this. And so they asked if we could start a cannabis studies program. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that whole process later on. But I said, hey, why not? I have a really entrepreneurial, really social enterprise motivated team over here. And I took that challenge and said, let's move forward with that. And we were able to develop a cannabis studies program. But we knew that our vision had to be extremely bold and to seize the significant opportunities in this emerging market. And what we have established in a goal for ourselves is by 2025, our college will serve as Chicago's leading partner for cannabis and urban ag education. And so we're really excited about that. And at the forefront is equity in education. We're supporting equitable industry access and community mobility through education. And the goal of my dean, and she's extremely ambitious, is that we will serve as a research hub for cannabis product research. And we have already started a number of conversations with universities in the state of Illinois, as well as outside of Illinois. And so to date, in 2 years, we have made some tremendous strides. We wrote and were awarded the state of Illinois and ICCB, Illinois Community College Board Cannabis Vocational Pilot Program license. So we're able to offer a cannabis certificate. Behind me, which you can't see, but it's right outside my office. We went to the chancellor and he gave us funding to build a greenhouse. And it is in its last stages of being up and running to give our students a plant touching experience. Again, we were able to offer a dispensary operations basic certificate, which we also got financial aid approved. And we always are offering a series of continuing education courses and workshops. And so now let's talk a little bit about our approach to equity planning. One of the first things that we embarked upon was, bringing together all of the key stakeholders, our faculty, our staff, community members, even some students, to come up with an equity statement. And what we believe fundamentally is that equal access to higher education is a fundamental right of all students, and that our job is to mitigate barriers that impede our students' ability to be successful. That was a powerful statement for us because we had never had an equity statement, and we always talked about equality, and people really couldn't differentiate between the two. So that has really grounded us and led us to where we are today. And so we adapted from Georgia State University, the mantra that we must be student ready versus students being college ready. I think oftentimes at our institutions, we presume that our students have the self-efficacy, the fortitude, the ability to advocate for themselves, and they really do not. And we expect them to be college ready when they walk into our doors. And what we learned is that's a real unrealistic expectation. And so as we started creating and refining our strategies, we leveraged historical data, we looked at nationally recognized best practices and innovative tactics to help us move the needle for student success. And when we talk about the attainment gap for our equity plan, because we are a predominantly Black institution, we looked at the attainment gap between African-American students and Hispanic students and white students, and then the attainment gaps between those students who received Pell and those who did not. As a result of this planning, we also created a standing equity committee. I am a member of the committee. I am wholly committed to ensuring that this committee lasts long after I leave this institution. And we even put financial resources behind the committee. It's one thing to say we're going to do all of this, to walk the walk, to talk the talk, but you really have to walk the walk. And equity is not cheap. And so we knew that getting to that point, we were going to have to dedicate some funding, and we have done that. We also, the City Colleges subsequently has hired an Associate Vice Chancellor for racial equity, which has been tremendously important in understanding the culture, level setting, and starting to have those really difficult conversations. And here at the college, we developed our 3-year equity plan. And some of the strategies included culturally responsive pedagogy, impactful student supports, and supports to overcome social barriers, which we'll talk a little bit more about, particularly around food and housing insecurity and mental health support. And so, I would be remiss if I just said, hey, this was really easy. We got all the answers. We absolutely did not, because again, the pandemic really threw a monkey wrench in the things. The global pandemic forced us to have to pivot to remote instruction. And I would be very disingenuous if I said we were prepared for that. I don't think many institutions were. But our district really took a proactive approach to ensure that our students were supported as much as possible when we had to pivot to remote. And if we didn't learn anything else during the pandemic as educators, we learned that the digital divide is real. And so relative to both accessibility and engagement, we struggled. It was really difficult. Our students did not have laptops. Our students did not have hotspots. Keeping them engaged in environments that weren't conducive to education really showed through after a semester, and we saw our success rates of our students. But we were able to do some things that I'll talk about to address that. But we did excel in supporting our students academically, socially, and some of their wellness needs as well. And that was based upon a huge commitment from our district and some additional HERF funding from the U.S. Department of Education. We did have a slow return to in-person, as many organizations had to experience. In 2021, On top of just trying to reassure people that our space was safe, we were grappling with the fact that our community was vaccinated at a rate of 1%. Currently, that has improved. There is still this resistance and hesitancy, if I can get that out, to come back into the building. But we currently have a 43.9% vaccination rate for our community, which is still far below that of the entire city of Chicago, which is 59.3%. And we are now providing free COVID testing, education, PPE, and the like. So we are making some tremendous strides, but still some major challenges and hurdles to jump over. So I want to talk to you a little bit more intentionally about the things that we are doing to help support our students, or have done to support our students through the pandemic. And one of the things that was really important for our faculty was to get more comfortable with having culturally responsive classrooms. And what we do is that we encourage faculty to deploy pedagogic strategies and competencies for teaching in a space and environment design in which all students have an opportunity and an ability to learn. They have to feel comfortable. Like I mentioned early, we are moving towards becoming an HSI, but we have a lot of faculty who were not accustomed to serving Hispanic students. And so to ensure that they felt comfortable in the space, we have done lots of professional development around that. And culturally responsive classrooms require a willingness of that college community, our faculty community, to view instruction through varied and inclusive cultural lenses. So that is absolutely still a work in progress for our faculty. And so to start having these conversations about cultural responsiveness, we knew that we had to have these really intentional 5 conversations. Now, this is not my brainchild. This is the brainchild of our Dean of Instruction, who has worked at a historically Black college and university in the past. And those are actually my faculty there on this picture, so I'm excited to see them. But we knew that we had to have these very intentional conversations if we wanted to move to a culturally competent teaching and learning environment. And so what that involves is, of course, critical reflection. It demands that we all respect each other in our space, that we have to be accommodating to each individual learner. We cannot assume that every student learns the same. And that it entails the use of intercultural communication skills. And a lot of people, may not realize that they don't have that or that they lack that skill. And so it's incumbent upon the institution to cultivate that. And that it necessitates focused activities and intentionally structured environments. And that is our classrooms and teaching spaces. So something that we all grapple with if you're in higher education is retention. And I'm just going to be quite frank, we really struggle in keeping the students who were formerly enrolled. They subsequently did not persist. We were able to recover this year. Our enrollment is up for the first time in I don't even know how many years, 10, 15 years. We have a 10% increase in new students. So we did a really good job of, getting new students in the door, but we really struggled keeping the students that were here. And so supporting student retention is a major initiative for us. And one of the most successful frameworks that we have recently implemented is Student Success Framework, which is our tiering program. And so we had to look at specifically the overall likelihood to retain the student. And so we're making some very intentional efforts. And this is from our academic deans to our faculty to our student services team. And through an algorithm, we looked at the following: the time of enrollment, how close to the semester start. That really tells you a lot about a student if they registered in advance or if they waited till the day before. We looked at their past academic history and the discipline or program of study they were looking to embark upon. And so we then had to plan to engage students through high impactful resources that I'll tell you a little bit more about. Now, in theory, this is what tiering of our student populations look like. There are 3 levels of tiering. And our first tier are those students who really need a lot of attention, and that is our coordinated care tier. And I'm not going to read all of the services, but they are really high touch services for those who fall into tier 1. Then we identify students in tier 2, and we call that collaborative care. Like they have some level of engagement, a little more self-efficacy. And so they're able to collaborate with key players across the college to kind of support themselves with a little help. And there's on-demand care. Those are those students who don't need a lot of attention, but we're available in the event that they need the attention. So we have also ramped up our engagement, and this is through CCA. These are some of the best practices that I talked to you that we have been using, the high impact practices. This is not new to most institutions, but we have really ramped up our efforts around alerts and interventions, tutoring, which includes supplemental instruction, and putting tutors in the classroom where students are not being successful. We've accelerated and fast-track developmental education, and those are the students who are taking and passing English 101. When students see the daunting task of having to get through that developmental ed pipeline, they oftentimes give up. So we had to find a way to get them through that process quicker so that they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. We extended our new student orientation. And this year we implemented our first year experience. And, a lot of colleges have been doing this forever. And yes, shame on Olive Harvey for, for the first time and forever offering a first year experience, a formal one. But it has really yielded tremendous results. The level of engagement that we have experienced by our One Book, One Campus reading of Stacey Abrams' book, Lead from the Outside, has had a tremendous impact on the engagement of our students. And so this again is the brainchild of my Dean of Instruction. It is our student success framework. It is the academic Venn diagram, I like to call it. And it's really around purposeful choice of our students. In order to get the purposeful choice space, students have to meet critical milestones. We have to create for them an academic mindset. We have to let them know, this is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but there are some things that you'll have to go through in order to get that degree, to get that certificate. And with that, we have heightened our academic engagement so that students don't see this as a chore, that they see it as a means to an end. And even more importantly, there has to be full momentum along a clear pathway. Students really have to see the end game. They have to know that they are fully supported, but at the end of the day, when they get through this entire framework and this process, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So a program that is really has been really successful for us, again, we just started in spring of 2021, is our Milton's Mentors. And Milton Olive III is one of our college's namesake. We are Olive Harvey. And Milton was a Vietnam War veteran who made the ultimate sacrifice by giving his own life. He fell on a grenade to save the lives of others. So we, the name Milton Mentors is really personal to us here at Olive Harvey College. And we implemented it in the spring of 2021. We had 126 students who were from that tier 1. Remember, that's that coordinated care group of students who really need some additional support. We had 31 faculty, staff, and administrators serve as mentors to our mentees. And some of the anecdotal feedback has been extremely positive. The connections that they made with the students. I mean, there's tons of research out there around mentoring and the impact it has on student persistence and completion and student success. And so again, not recreating the wheel, just making a concerted effort to ensure that this opportunity was even afforded to our students, because it wasn't. We were able to communicate with our students via Zoom meetings, emails, and phone calls. And what we learn, and this is always the best thing about these types of initiatives, is our lessons learned and what we learned from our students about what they needed based on referrals we made and just feedback from them. That we learned that technology, again, laptops and hotspots were absolutely critical for to their success, that there was a level of food insecurity that was occurring and that they needed some additional support, be it SNAP, link, or use of our food pantry, that book scholarships were necessary. And I'll talk a little bit about how radically we're going to address that. And that mental health services were more important than ever. Our students, again, come from a very challenging environment. And then you couple that with a pandemic and the impact of a pandemic, our students were really struggling, and we were able to find some additional resources through our HER funding to address some mental health issues as well for our students. And so I just spoke a little bit about addressing food and housing insecurity. In the spring, when we had to shelter in place, our food pantry closed. And we're a community college, we're wholly committed to our community, and our community is our students and those external to us. But we were able to do a number of activities to ensure that our students' food insecurities were met. We could not, call ourselves a community college and not address the basic needs of our students. And so these are some of the things that we did throughout the entire pandemic, still able to serve our students, still opening up our space so that our students can walk into our college and access food. And I just think it speaks, volumes to the commitment of our team, our student services team, all of our volunteers who made sure that our students' basic needs. And so you might ask, these are a lot of activities, a lot of initiatives, and actually these are just a few. And so I would encourage you all to read our equity plan. But what do we do now and the next steps of our equity plan? Our equity plan cannot be a document that we just sit on a shelf and never look at until 3 years from now when it's time to create another one. We see our plan as being iterative and constantly addressing the needs of our students and our community. And so we're going to be looking at our plan from 3 lenses. How do we continue to remove social barriers? We're going to continuously find ways to develop our faculty and staff so that we can address any implicit biases that people may have, continuously working on culturally competent classrooms. I got the cue, I'm coming. And so those are the 3 lenses. And we're going to continue faculty dialogues through our Bright Space, which is our learning management system. And those are some of the conversations that we'll be having with faculty. You can go on because I definitely want to be able to get to questions and answers. And so our next steps, one of our major initiatives was OERs, and that's in our plan, Open Educational Resources. But we talked about being disruptive, right? I have recently challenged our team to even be more disruptive. When we learned that only 30% of our students purchase textbooks, how in the world do we expect them to be successful? And if we know this to be a fact, if we know that students are not purchasing textbooks, then it's incumbent upon us to act. And so what I'm going to do, what I'm asking for our academic team to have conversations with our faculty about, is for us to purchase textbooks, to get faculty to agree to, using the same textbook for at least 2 years, and we will purchase laptops for all of our students and download the books on their laptops. That's a huge undertaking. It's going to be really costly, but if we're really committed to equity, the cost is nominal in the big scheme of things. So that's our next big thing, and so the journey continues, and our plan is to continue to empower our students, to empower our community, and we're going to have, we're actually creating more relevant programming to address the needs of our students, and especially for those programs where inherently students of color have not been able to break into. That's aviation, cybersecurity, We will be opening a Center for Social Justice. Recently, historian Samuel Black passed away, and we are looking forward to naming our social justice center the Black Justice Center. And we will start more intentionally tracking and supporting social mobility as a key performance indicator. That's how important it is that we need to track that we are doing what we say we were going to do relative to equity. And so that if we can remove borders, we can remove barriers. And we're just excited to continue the work that we've been doing. And I'm even more excited to, answer any questions that you all may have and allowing me an opportunity to share some of the good work that my team at Olive Harvey College is doing. Thank you.
So questions have been coming through the chat. So
Okay.
I want to ask a couple of these questions. So one question was, did you have a formal assessment process to determine what level of care the students were? So you had your 1, 2, and 3 tier system?
Yeah, so there
Tier.
was there was absolutely an assessment. Actually, it was more about the algorithm, those 3 things that we kind of looked at to determine what those tiers were. This kind of happened really quickly. Ideally, it would have been great to have like this formal assessment tool that we could have utilized. But instead, we looked at those 3 factors that we talked about program of study, when they enrolled, and there was one more thing. But that is something, again, this is really iterative. We, based on the work that we've been doing with tiering, because we know that you will have to do some tweaking to it as we progress through tiering, we were awarded $40,000 from our district office to continue reevaluating the effectiveness and the efficacy of our tiering program.
Another question. What do you attribute to for your new student growth? Did any of your stimulus funds contribute to that?
So, the city colleges did have a campaign where you could come and take classes for free. We had very few students take advantage of that. What we believe to be the primary reason for the growth was our short-term programs. Like, a lot of folks needed to come in, be reskilled, skill up, change, pivot, pivot careers. And so we offered a number of short-term certificates that people could take and then improve their economic mobility, which is then, speaks to why our retention suffered, right? Because students came and they left right away because they got what they needed. And so that was the trade-off. These short-term certificates, particularly around cannabis, was really helpful in increasing our enrollment. And our enrollment team was really intentional about recruiting this year, understanding that there was a pandemic and, people were still apprehensive about going away to a 4-year institution. So why not come to your local community college? We also saw a major uptick in our dual credit and dual enrollment. So those students who were at our high schools were actually taking classes with us also simultaneously. So we did see a significant uptick in our dual credit, dual enrollment population.
That's great. That leads me to another question. I know that Olive Harvey is going to be one of the institutions that's participating in the new Lumina project, predominantly Black community colleges. Has your team started to think about a way to maybe create pathways for your short-term credentials into your 2-year program?
Oh, that it's so crazy. I meet with the chancellor this Friday, and one of the questions he's going to ask me is similar to yours. Like, you guys are up 10%, your retention is down. Like, what are you going to do to, to find some balance, right? And so what we talked about is that it is really important for us not to just create the short-term certificate, but to create stackable credentials. So, we start with a basic certificate. People get, a cursory certificate that can, lead to a livable wage. But if you're looking to get an associate's degree and, possibly move on to a 4-year institution, the next step is the advanced certificate. And then after the advanced certificate, you can matriculate to an associate degree, an AAAS or AAS. So yes, that is absolutely the plan. Our team is constantly looking to, ensure that we have relevant pedagogy that is stackable and leading to an associate's degree.
Okay, great. So I have 2 questions that are not related necessarily to that. One, Can you talk a little bit about the process of convincing your faculty to engage in culturally responsive pedagogy and to go through those trainings and to shift the way that they were organizing maybe their classes?
So, it's never an easy conversation with faculty, especially as it relates to academic freedom, because of course, and I apologize if there's any faculty on here, everything falls under academic freedom, and how dare administrators infringe upon that right. But we have an amazing faculty here. We have probably the most tenured faculty in the district, meaning that they've been here for some time. And I think they were ready and willing to change. And a lot of that had to do with our willingness to just have open and transparent conversations, to create caring circles, safe spaces. I have an amazing dean and vice president of academic affairs who are constantly in communication with our faculty, trying to meet any of their professional development needs, affording the opportunity and space to continuously develop people. My vice president has, I think his dissertation was on microaggressions and implicit bias. So he's constantly talking about people, reminding them that they may not realize that exists, but it does, and it impacts how you teach. And we don't want that to impact how you teach. We really want you to come from an authentic space of equity and inclusiveness. And so it has really just been our willingness to open our doors, to sit down and have hard conversations with faculty.
And I have to say, before we go to the next question, that I think that is a testament to the leadership at your college, because what we find with CCA is part of what we do when we come in on these different spaces, whether systems or states or institutions, is work on the building the coalition, right? Creating conditions to have change, because you can't just plop in somewhere and say, oh, this is what you need to do. So it takes time to develop that trust. And so I think,
oh yeah, and let me tell you, Olive Harvey College had 7 presidents in the last 10 years prior to my arrival. And they had 2 female presidents who were here before me. And again, I had a more, mature faculty who really just distrusted women in leadership. I'm just going to be quite frank, because they really had been let down. And they even talked about likening it to post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, look, we're tired of administrators coming in, and it's a revolving door. Where's that level of commitment? And I think the fact that I have now been here almost 4 years, I've been with the district 22 years, like, I'm committed to this work. And I told them, I can show you better. I can tell you, just give me an opportunity. And I think I would say 99% are convinced now.
That's good, because you're showing them. So I think that's good. Okay, so we had another question about, have you found that the barriers students are facing are predominantly academic in nature or non-academic?
So, I think a lot of it is, so there were always academic challenges, even before the pandemic, as well as social economic challenges. I think, again, the pandemic just compounded that. I think our most prevailing issue for our students that, we weren't prepared for, but we have prepared ourselves for now, are the mental health challenges that our students have to deal with. The fact that, now their parents are out of work, or they're out of work, their children aren't in school, so they can't work. Like, it was just, obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And so we really had to ramp up our virtual student services. Our mental health wellness center has been an absolute asset. Like, that team of clinicians and professionals have really stepped up. And so, we did see that the pandemic impacted our student success. Fall 2020, our students failed miserably. I'm just going to be honest. And I think because, and this is why we did an addendum to our equity plan, we assumed that students were technologically savvy, right? We learned they're not technologically savvy, they're smartphone savvy, which is very different. And so those students who were accustomed to being face-to-face, were not able to pivot to a remote modality and navigate successfully. And we have since addressed that by putting in, videos on how to use Brightspace and how to connect virtually with your advisor and the like. Like, it was a labor of love, and our students suffer as a result of it. So I think I would almost say it's like 50-50. Like, it's just been really traumatic, which is why we had to be super intentional about our equity efforts.
And I have one, this might be our last question because of time.
Okay.
So I was very intrigued by your choice to embrace the cannabis industry in response to the environment that your institution is in, and the fact that most of your students are impacted in some way,
Absolutely.
the war on drugs.
Right.
And so I'm just curious as to the process of getting your board to agree, your chancellor to agree, the United States government to give you financial aid.
Right.
I mean, that seems like a lot. So
Yeah. So let me tell you, if I can, if I could leave one thing with folks on this call, is to be disruptive, be very aggressive, and push the envelope, right? When I applied for this position, I was very clear with the chancellor that I like to take risks, right? Because the return is so great. And we have such a, tremendous obligation to the students we serve that I feel like you have to take calculated risk. And I know the risk associated with starting a cannabis studies program and having hemp plants on campus in a greenhouse. But if we were going to truly be committed to equity, then this was something that I was willing to go to war for. And I virtually had to. The running joke across the district is that I had to sell weed to the board. And I literally had to meet individually after, having a conversation with the chancellor. He's like, okay, I kind of get it. I understand the ancillary benefits, the opportunities for careers and the like. But, we have a really conservative board. So, you know what you're going to have to do? Talk to each and every trustee individually. I was like, oh my gosh. And I did. I had to talk to every trustee individually to talk to them about the opportunities that cannabis could afford to our students, the social equity arm of cannabis, and the amount of funding that these dispensaries and corporations are required to give to nonprofits, to institutions of higher education and CBOs. After a lot of talking to trustees, presenting formally at our board meeting, writing and talking to our senators and to elected officials, we finally got it approved. And so we couldn't be more delighted about selling weed over here at Olive Harvey College.
well, I think that it's a testament of the fact that you just have to be assertive. You have to know what your students need. We're at time. I just want to say the things I'm taking away from this as you're talking about equity and meeting the needs of the students is that you can really tell that you adjusted the way you were doing things to look at the individual needs of the students that you had, whether that's the food pantry or changing your academic programs, looking for stackable credentials. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I'm taking away is that if we're going to really be student-centered institutions, we have to look at what the students need and not what we think that they need. This preconceived notion, so this was really an amazing and enlightening I'm stumbling conversation. So President Hollingsworth, I just want to tell you thank you so much for your leadership in this space and for your willingness to share what you've learned. And you all should look up Olive Harvey College and all the stuff that they're doing.